Well, hey, everybody, greetings from Central Virginia. I am so sorry that I cannot be there today in person. I would love to be with you in Quincy, but unfortunately, circumstances dictate that I need to be here this weekend. So thank you to Jim Wallace, thank you to Garrett, thank you to all of the folks at Goal for allowing me to be a part of this freedom celebration virtually. And I do want to celebrate you for all of your work, for all of the activism that you've been engaged with, pushing back against HD 4420 and the unconstitutional assault on our fundamental civil rights. You know, Jim Wallace has been, I think, correctly portraying this as a civil rights fight. And I can tell you, as somebody who lives in a place where the Brown versus Board of Education decision was greeted with massive resistance in the 1950s and 1960s, I know that it feels like the odds are unsurmountable at times. But I'm here to tell you that you can win and you can make a huge change in Massachusetts with your activism, with your engagement, by pushing again for the recognition of our fundamental civil rights. Not far from where I am today, in Prince Edward County, Virginia, the news of Brown versus Board of Education was greeted with the decision to shut down the public schools rather than integrate. For 5 years in Prince Edward County, the public schools were shut down. It ended up taking another Supreme Court decision for the leaders in Prince Edward County to acknowledge, however reluctantly, that their days of violating the fundamental rights of residents, the fundamental rights of school kids, was over. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know anything about that history when I moved to Farmville. First time I heard about this was probably a couple months after I moved. I was talking with an older guy, and he asked me, said, "So do you know what happened here back in the 50s and 60s?" And I said, "No, not really." And he told me about this young woman, teenager named Barbara Johns, who led a walkout of the black school over the deplorable conditions. The lawsuits that were filed that got wrapped into Brown versus Board of Education, and then the backlash when the Brown versus Board of Education decision came down. This guy ended up being taught in people's basements, in churches, in private homes for 5 years. His father, who was an educator, was told that he could stay on as a janitor if he didn't want to, go somewhere else. He chose not to. He helped to educate the black school kids who had no place to go. And I was so stunned when I heard this man's story, because it was so unlike the community that Farmville and Prince Edward County is today. It was unfathomable for me that those were the circumstances that this young man, at the time, had to live in. And again, it is night and day from the reality and the genuine progress that has been made in Prince Edward County the decades since. I am reminded, again, of the massive resistance displayed by civil rights opponents in the 1950s and 60s to the massive resistance to the recognition of our right to keep and bear arms that is underway not only in Massachusetts but all across the country. Again, you have people who are proclaiming to be acting in the greater good, proclaiming to be saving their communities, proclaiming that they are upholding some sort of beneficial status quo, when in reality, what they are doing is depriving people of their fundamental right. In this case, ultimately, the right to protect themselves and their loved ones from harm. I firmly believe that the work that you are doing today is just as vitally important as the work that Barbara Johns and those school kids did in Prince Edward County in the 1950s. And I further believe that decades from now, your activism will be lauded in the same way that Barbara John's activism is praised. The folks who are trying to keep you from your right to keep and bear arms aren't just standing on the wrong side of the Constitution. They're standing on the wrong side of history. And you all are quite literally freedom fighters in Massachusetts. And the work that you are doing resonates far beyond your borders. I want you to know that. I'm not going to take up a lot of your time. I know that listening to folks on tape isn't nearly as good as listening to folks in person. So I want you to get back to enjoying your celebration. Enjoy the conviviality. I hope that you get a chance to meet new folks who are fellow freedom fighters, forge new connections, but please keep up your activism, keep up your engagement, keep up that hard work. We are watching all around the country, and as best as we can, we've got your back. So thank you again for allowing me to be a part of this. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and keep up the fight.